Alright, so this is part three of the series that I'm doing on the subject of homosexuality in the Bible. And the sections that we'll be going over is First Corinthians chapter 6 verses 9 through 10 and First Timothy chapter 1 verses 9 through 10. Let's see. So we've gone over, the Genesis thing with Adam and Eve and the story of Sodom, and of course we went over Leviticus 18:22 and verses in Romans. And so now we're moving on to the next part. This part of it probably won't be very long. I thought it was going to take a while, but once I really got it studied and broken down into a more of a sermon format instead of an essay format, like how I had it, uh, it'll just be more of breaking words down and explaining what they mean in the original language. But once I explain it, the things that break it down to be will be so much obvious that I won't have to go into so much detail, and it actually helps shorten it up a little bit. So, uh, starting off in First Corinthians, so go ahead and if you're with me online, just go ahead with me and turn to it. So I'll be heading there too. Alright, so here we are. First Corinthians chapter 6 verses 9 through 10. Reading out of the King James. It says, "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revelers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God." So, right here we got a list of people that are, sinners not inheriting the kingdom of God because of their continuous sinning and unrepentive heart. And in this list, the words and phrases we're going to talk about is here at the end of verse 9, where it says, "Nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind." So the reason why we're looking into that is because over here in the New King James, the words and phrases that they have in place of those are nor homosexuals nor sodomites. And this is a very unfaithful translation to have the word homosexuals in there, because as we break these words down in the original meanings, we'll see that that's not the case at all. And as a matter of fact, if you have a pretty good study Bible, a lot of times they may have, like, for example, an asterisk beside it to hint something to you, like maybe they want you to look at the bottom at the footnotes or something that they have. And some of the Bibles will actually tell you, it'll have the asterisk beside the word homosexuals, and it'll say what we really mean is catamites. It'll have something there that it's saying, okay, this is what we really mean by this. And it's really sad that this happens a lot, because not only do we find out that using homosexual is just the absolute wrong thing to do here, but when you find out what the words and phrases are gonna mean around this word in this verse, and in another verse we're gonna go over later in First Timothy, you'll see that the original definitions of what these words mean go together way more with the other things, the other words and phrases around this word in the verses. It makes way more sense than trying to basically force homosexual in there to justify prejudices, because we know that there are not many people in the church today that are willing to basically stand up and speak out and say, hey, this is not right. So let's go ahead and jump into this. First, let me say that I'm looking at my notes here. I was looking through the Amplified Bible that I have, and it's really upsetting to me because I really enjoy reading the Amplified because they use the parentheses and system brackets to try to explain what words and phrases in the Bible mean better than what we may understand right off the bat. They'll take parentheses and brackets to add words in as a way to explain better what is being said. Like, okay, this word can also mean this, and this. And I enjoy reading it. It tries its best to help explain things and break things down better, but I was really disappointed because in the Amplified, instead of having, two different words or phrases divided by commas, what they did was they took effeminate and abusers of themselves with mankind, and it seems like what they did was they just took those together and just put simply the phrase, nor those who participate in homosexuality. Like, they didn't even have two different things separated there. They just kind of mushed it together. So the question is, how is it that these more modern translations are trying to make it say homosexual even though that's not what it's about? And some may be saying, well, how do you know that that's not what it's about? Well, that's what we're going to get into. So, starting off here, jumping in, in the King James, it says effeminate and abusers of themselves with mankind. Going with the word effeminate first here. Now, here's the thing about effeminate. A lot of people will go back to this and say, okay, it makes sense for this to be translated in a more updated version of the Bible to say gay or homosexual because, stereotypically speaking, gay men are usually feminine. So because of that, effeminate, obviously that's what it should be in a more modern term, homosexual. Problem with that is, somebody could come along and very easily say, well, if you go through this list, just looking at it from what you see, looking at it as what you see is what you get perspective and not really digging in and going back to original definitions. If I just flat out look at this list in verses 9 through 10, it looks as though these people are all just people. In other words, it's not specifically saying men or women. Each word, like, drunkards and idolaters and fornicators, they're talking about people in general. So if every word or phrase is talking about people in general, that's like saying, well, effeminate, if it says nor effeminate, that means that anybody who's feminine, whether it's a man or a woman. So it's like God hates feminine men and feminine women, but loves masculine men and masculine women. So it's like, you're trying to say, well, God, he likes those strong butch women, but, not the flamboyantly homosexual men or something. It's like that's what you're saying. So somebody could very easily come along and say something like that. So how do we know? Well, like I said, we got to go back. So as I've said, I believe in another sermon, of course, the Bible didn't just fall out of the sky, being a book that just fell down from heaven. It was originally written, in scriptures and eventually put in a Bible to make a whole book together. But originally it was written in different languages, older languages like, Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. It wasn't in English. English is one of the further down the line languages that it was translated to. So with that said, it's always good and important to go back to the original languages and what it meant, because to me, when I look at Bible translations and I try to start with like something kind of old and I move forward to something new, yes, a lot of times it's translated in ways that we can understand better because, more modern words are used, but a lot of times through the constant translating, there's so much stuff to me that seems lost, there's so much really good stuff that isn't conveyed as well because of just being constantly retranslated and put into someone's own perspective, own words, and sometimes a lot of the beauty is lost in it a lot of times as well. But anyway, so going with this word effeminate here, going back to the original Greek, the word for it in the Greek was malakos, and it meant soft. And there were two different kinds of soft. There was soft as in soft clothing, like, fine, soft material for clothing. And the other one, soft, was sexually related. It meant, for example, having soft or loose sexual morals, or a lack of sexual morals, rather. And a lot of times, if you look up this word effeminate, in the original language and everything, you'll find that they equate the word catamite with it once it starts to talk about sex. And this is very, very, very important, because what we're seeing here is basically, it's like saying effeminate in this case, in this context, is speaking on a specific type of catamite. And why am I going with the sexual definition and not the clothing? Well, I think it's pretty fairly obvious that it's not talking about softness and soft material. It's verses 9 through 10 here in 1 Corinthians 6 is talking about people and their sins. God's not raging at anybody's clothing. He's raging at types of people. So it's pretty safe to say here that it is a sexual thing, especially when you consider that it came right after talking about fornicators and adulterers. So it's pretty safe to say that we're talking about the sexual context here. So again, catamites. So if it's talking about a specific kind of catamites, well, what is a catamite? So a catamite, if you go to what it really means, it's actually a boy who was used and kept for sexual pleasures from grown men. So basically we're talking about pedophilia. So that's what a catamite was. So what we're actually getting at here is a catamite, talking about the word effeminate here in malakos, the original Greek language, and the softness. In this context, it's basically like saying it's a catamite who has weak morals sexually, someone who is voluptuous and into sexual sin really bad. And basically, what we're getting at here is we're not just talking, in other words, we're not talking about someone underage who is really being used against their will. It's talking about more so a catamite who has become accepting of it, or who has more or less been brainwashed into believing that doing this is okay. Having sex at that age, at a young age, having sex with an adult, possibly seducing an adult, that's okay, and they are indulging in this sexual escapade with this grown man. That's what it's saying. It's more of a specific kind of catamite. So it's not just a catamite who, a boy who is just completely against his will doing these things, like it would be in a lot of cases. It's someone who is specifically into it. They're wanting it, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at here. So pausing on that for just a moment, pausing on it, we're going to come back, but pausing on it, let's move forward for a moment to the phrase abusers of themselves with mankind, which came right after effeminate. So abusers of themselves with mankind. Okay, this word, the word originally and the Greek was arsenokoites. And this word was a very rare Greek word. It's only been recorded and finalized just a little over 70 times, I believe I read, just a little over 70 times in Greek literature. And so it hasn't always been easy to understand what the word meant because it was something not used a whole lot. And because of the fact that it's believed that this is actually the Bible, the New Testament is the first time that this word is actually recorded, the first time it's recorded in the Greek literature. It's believed that Paul, the fellow writing this in 1 Corinthians, it's believed that he was the one who actually made up the word himself. So with that said, it's very important to know what he was saying, and whatever he meant at the end of the day is going to be what it really means, not what we think it means. I mean, we're not just talking about something, written here in the scriptures. It's believed that this guy actually made this word up. So, hey, we got to know what it's saying here, not just what we believe in modern times, what we want it to believe, I guess is what I'm getting at. So, arsenokoites, it is a compound word made up of arseno and koites, arsen, meaning man, and the koites part meaning a bed, a couch, or some type of sleeping place. So a lot of people will look at it as something along the lines of man bedder or male bed or male bedder or something like that. And that's kind of vague because, a man could be doing pretty much anything in a bed. I mean, he could be sleeping in the bed, he could be having sex with somebody in the bed, he could be masturbating in the bed, he could be humping the bed. Why people hump beds, I don't know, it happens. But anyway, but I'm just making the point that a lot of things could be happening with this man in the bed is the point. Maybe he's getting on with an imaginary friend. I don't understand, I don't know. So now it's more along the lines of we got to get down to the specifics. What exactly does this mean? It's kind of vague. But he knew what he meant when he was writing it, and the readers at the time knew. So it helps to backtrack more. The more you go back and dig backwards, the more you're going to more than likely find the truth than to go more with modern things, even if it's easier to understand. So you really have to dig and study more. Well, there were Bible translations by a John Wycliffe, and in the Wycliffe writings, arsenokoites was translated as sin of Sodom. Now, as we've gone over in the part 1 of the series, the part where I got into Sodom and Gomorrah and all that, we saw how there were many sins of Sodom. First of all, one of the biggest ones being inhospitality, not homosexuality. It rhymed, I didn't even realize that till now. But anyway, and the big sexual sin, other than being gay, like people want it to be about, the actual sexual sin was rape. That's what it was about. And if you see, where it's saying, okay, in the Wycliffe translations, arsenokoites is the sin of Sodom, it's translated as sin of Sodom. Well, again, there are many sins, but in this context, we know that it has to have something to do with sex. Well, the big sexual sin was rape. So basically, this man bed or male bedder is, well, just that, it's somebody that's bedding you down. And it's rape. It's a man that's forcing himself on you. And with all that said, now we want to take this moment to go back to the effeminate, because evidently there's a link between these two. Otherwise you wouldn't have people wanting to combine them and make just one phrase in certain Bible translations. So what's going on here? So going back to catamite, which we were looking at earlier, going back to this catamite, which was a more specific kind of malachose, effeminate, soft. Basically, to sum this up, here's how it goes. You got catamite. This word is coming from the Latin name catamitus. This name is coming from the Greek name Ganymede or Ganymedes, and Ganymedes or Ganymede was a character in Greek mythology. Now, of course, I'm sure a lot of you listening probably you know what Greek mythology is, but just to help people out here, we've talked before about paganism and things like that in the Bible, and people worshiping false gods, and their gods and people that they believed in had their own storylines about who they were and what they did, so on and so forth. And the Greeks had a lot of that, and of course we call it Greek mythology today. Well, in Greek mythology there was a character named Zeus, and if you've heard of no other god or goddess, fake gods, I'm sure you've heard of Zeus. Zeus, I believe is how his name is spelled. But anyway, in the Greek mythology, this Ganymede character, was an underage fella who was basically abducted and raped by Zeus. So you have Ganymede, who was kidnapped and raped, and first of all, that right there should tell you, because a lot of people want to try to say, oh, that's not what a Canaanite is. Canaanite is just a homosexual. No. We've already discussed what it is just now. But then to top it all off, we see that where we get this word from, it traces back from Catamite to Catamitus to Ganymede. It goes back to a character who actually was an underage boy who was used against his will sexually. So it's one thing for that to be the actual definition of catamite, but then when you go back and you see there's a storyline behind this word or name, it's like, well, hello, you gotta see it. It's not just some gay guy, it's some little boy who's used against his will. So with that said, what was performed against Ganymede by Zeus was called arsenokoites. So what does that tell you? The arsenokoites was the rape. So now moving on, here's something else that I've dug into. I was reading a book and dug into this, and there's this Greek mythological legend, and it's a twist on the Bible story of Adam and Eve, and and Satan in the garden and everything. And I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I don't know if it's Nas or Naas or Nias or something, but Naas, and it says he's supposed to be the Satan figure in the story, in this Greek mythological legend of it. And Nas uses his power to take advantage of Adam and Eve and even has sex with them. And it was said that he had Adam like a boy. What does that tell you? So the act performed against him when saying this, the word that they used was arsenokoites. So this word, this rare word, it's been hard for people to understand what it meant, but tracing back into the areas where it was used, like in a lot of this Greek mythology and stuff, we see a constant pattern of either like child molestation, or this example I just read of somebody having somebody like a boy, and this rape that's used against them is described as arsenokoites. So it's rape, it's somebody that's trying to rape somebody, and we see quite a bit here that in this section it's talking about child molestation, a child molester. The rape of a child. So that's really what this is really about. If you go back to what it, and listen, you got to understand, we say, well, the Bible is the inspired word of God, and yes it is, but the thing that you got to understand is the scriptures, the original scriptures, the things that were first written by people who were inspired by God to write these things, they had the inerrancy. In other words, they had it perfect. They wrote it how it was supposed to be written. And through the translating by all these different people over the years, that's where things kind of got a little screwy. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what these modern concepts are going to say. At the end of the day, if something that we're reading in modern writings are different from what we read in the original writings, I'm sorry, but the only obvious thing to do is to go back to the original writings. So, with that said, this is what it was really about. The perfect writing of it, from God, this is what it was about. It wasn't about gay guys. It was about a man taking advantage of a little boy. So we see that here now, and I hope that point got across there. But now moving on, where do I want to go to now? Moving on to 1 Timothy chapter 1, 9 through 10. So if anybody's following along, just hop on over there. Alright, so 1 Timothy chapter 1, 9 through 10. And I hope you follow along with me on this one. There's a part later where I want you to really watch some words here when I go over some stuff so you can follow along better. But starting off here with verse 9. Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers and fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, for men stealers, for liars, for perjured persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine. So, okay, here's what I want to get at here, and I'm just gonna dive right in. The part here in, let's see, verse 10, right at the start, it says whoremongers and them that defile themselves with mankind. Now I'll go ahead and start off right here and say that the part that says for them that defile themselves with mankind, it probably sounds familiar. It sounds just like what we read a moment ago that said, abusers of themselves with mankind. So it's the same thing. Why I bring that up, it's the same thing. It goes back to our sine coitus, rape, but there's other words here, whoremongers. I bring this up to bring up whoremongers as well, because whoremongers and the part that says them that defile themselves with mankind are used by some people to say, well, this is homosexuals. These are, homosexual people. No, my goodness, people, no, that's that's not what it is. The definition of a whoremonger, first of all, it comes from pornos, pornography. But anyway, pornos. That's the word it comes from. And it's Greek, and it's the definition of it is a man who indulges in fornication or prostitution. So that's what that is. And if we're honest with ourselves, that could be a gay guy, a straight guy that does that, and even with women can indulge in fornication or prostitution. And with me saying that whoremonger should ring a bell, it's got whore in it. Whore, that's what we would call a woman that is a prostitute or gets around a lot. Well, whoremonger is the male version, I guess you could say. Well. So that right there, it's there's things here and there, little nuggets here and there in the Bible that just really, if we would just really come together and want to try to come together and study it better. Oh goodness, there's just so much. And I want to pause right here for just a moment to read something that some notes here. And it's also another little nugget of a revelation, because I want to pause and talk about sodomite again. Sodomite, that people, which is a word in the Bible that people want to try to say is gay men, and it's not. We already talked about how, the big S, if it's sodomite with a big S, it's somebody from Sodom, the place Sodom, and then if it's a little s, it's sodomite, meaning a male shrine prostitute, a male who was a sexual prostitute in pagan worship, pagan temple worship, how they worshipped false gods and things like that. And there were women that did these things. There were all kinds of people doing all kinds of things and having wild sex orgies and things, but God was going out his way to make sure people understood, listen, this isn't just a thing about women. I'm not going to sit here and just put women down and say whores and blah, 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 blah. No, there's whoremongers and there's sodomites, you know what I mean? There's men that do this stuff too, and I don't want you guys doing it either. I don't want you thinking that just because you're men, you can just run amok and do whatever you want to do either. And a lot of times we don't want to see it that way, so we make these words try to be about gay men, and because of that we look at it as, oh, well, there's nothing in the Bible against men doing what they want to do, so I'm going to do what I want to do. No. No. But I bring the word sodomite up again because I wanted to read this. It's from Deuteronomy 23:17. Yes, it's a verse that I wasn't intending on going over in this one, but I'm just pausing to read this just for a moment here. Deuteronomy 23:17 says, "There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel." So this verse is comparing female whores to male sodomites. So here's a little part in the Bible that people don't really want to acknowledge, and I never really hear it, talked about a lot when talking about sodomites. And I think it's because it's revealing something right here. It's saying, the daughters whores being, daughters being whores, and the sons being sodomites, was comparing whores to sodomites. Well, we know what a whore is. It's a woman messing around. Well, what must a sodomite be? It's a guy messing around. So it's not, it doesn't make sense to say, if it's comparing those two, it doesn't make sense to say, oh, well, a sodomite is a gay man. Well, is it like saying that a whore is a lesbian? Usually when you think of whores, I think we all know you can be a straight woman or a lesbian to be a whore, but I think it's pretty safe to say a lot of times when you think of the word whore, a lot of times you think of a woman that's messing around with a lot of guys a lot of times. Just because that's the image that's been put in our heads a lot. So, you clearly have to see in this verse that it's not necessarily a gay guy thing, it's just a guy thing, like a guy that's whoring around. But anyway, people just want to see it how they want to see it, and that's what I get told. Oh, you just want to justify your sin and look at it how you want to, and I'm just like, dude, are we reading the same book? Anyway, okay, I'm not gonna go there. Back to this 1 Timothy thing, 1 Timothy 1:9 through 10. Back to this. So again, back to the verse 10 where it's talking about the whoremongers and then them that defile themselves with mankind. So we've talked about that. We've got the them that defile themselves with mankind, the arsenicoites, and then you got the rapers, basically, and then you got the whoremongers, which are the men who indulge in fornication and prostitution. So we now see what that is. It's not gay men, it's not it's not just saying, hey, these fags over here. Let's look at something else right fast. Right after, in verse 10, right after it says, for whoremongers and for them that defile themselves with mankind, it says, for men stealers. Men stealers. So what is men stealers? Men stealers in the original Greek was andropodistes. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it with accuracy, but close enough. And it meant a slave dealer, a man stealer, or a kidnapper, something along those lines. So, with that said, let me stop and say this. Let me read what I put in my notes here, and I'll just kind of sum this up, and I'll wrap this lesson up. This is what I got here in my notes here I typed up. So, someone labeled as andropodistes would be a person who uses his power to capture other free men and children to put them into some type of slavery, or is a dealer in a slave trade business to import and export slaves to different areas. With all of that said, it is no coincidence. Now I want you to hold on. Let me pause here. Let me tell you. Look at these words. If you're reading along in your Bible, look at these three parts here in verse 10, the whoremongers, them that defile themselves with mankind, and men stealers. Look at that while I read this part that I typed up. With all of that said, it is no coincidence that the word arsenicoitai, or them that defile themselves with mankind, is placed right in the middle of pornos, or whoremonger, and andropodistes, or men stealers and kidnappers, on verse 10's list, because arsenicoitai, man, will not only sexually use and abuse the whores and prostitutes of pornos, but he may also be an andropodistes by enslaving men and children and selling or trading them in different types of slave trade rings, including sex slave trades. So what I'm saying here is the order that these in are not a coincidence. The part about them that defile themselves with mankind, the ones that are doing the raping, they'll take advantage of those whoremongers who, are loose. They're just getting it on with whoever, so they're going to take advantage of them sexually, but they're also going to be involved with these men stealers, the ones who are out kidnapping, because if they deal with these guys, they can get slaves to also take advantage of, to sexually abuse, and chances are it's probably not just an adult, but a kid. It's going to be a kid, a kidnapper, men stealer, kidnapper. It goes hand in hand. Is really what it's saying here. So not just the adults, but the kids as well. And so this would be another example of children being sexually abused, child sex abuse, which we just went over in that First Corinthians area we just got done with. So it's another instance where we are seeing either people wanting to use things like men whores, people being whores or being temple prostitutes, to try to say gay men when no, that's not it. Or also trying to take pedophiles and child abuse and saying, oh, well, we'll just throw gay men on it and just call it a day. No, because what's actually happening here when we do this, like I said, first of all, we give a lot of the men who read the Bible the mindset that, okay, if we're just calling these women whores and, oh, well, if whoremongers is gay men, then that means we're not whores at all. So we're not whores. When we mess around, we're just players and pimps, and it's okay, because Bible doesn't speak out on it, and they had their concubines in the Bible days, so we're just gonna mess around with whoever we want, but the women have to be tamed, and they can't be messing around, and it's okay for we to do what we do. So it already gives that mindset out. But then to top it off, when we cover up the whole pedophile thing and not talk about it and just try to, sweep it under the rug and try to place it with homosexual, well then people who are child molesters are not getting the truth. They're not getting all of the word. They're not getting the understanding that, hey, this is not a good thing. This is not something that God approves of. This is not something you should be doing. Because even though to a lot of us we would say, well, Doug, Kobe, of course people know that touching kids is wrong. Even people that do it know that it's wrong. But you gotta understand there are people who do that, and because they don't necessarily see something in the Bible about it, or they don't believe it's in there, because it is, but they don't believe it, or they don't see it, or they're not taught it, or it's not translated right, they're not getting the truth. And because they're not getting the truth, they're just thinking, well, God hasn't addressed it, so I can do this and it's not going to be a big deal. And there's so many kids that get hurt in this. They get involved and they get hurt. They get messed up mentally and psychologically. I really believe it messes with them on a spiritual level. It really does things to them. And the thing about it is, it can give them a warped mindset of what love really is. And what's really strange about it too is, we sit here and we make the whole gay thing, we make it be a sin. It's not one. We make it be one to cover up other sins. Am I the only one that's acknowledging this? And it's a problem, but it's not being addressed. It's not being addressed enough. It's not being addressed loud enough. I'll just say that much. But other than having the mindset, these kids getting molested, not only will they have the mindset that, a terrible mindset, a warped mindset of what love is and everything, but there are also some kids who it'll be, the opposite. Instead of being this withdrawn kid who just is quiet and doesn't want to talk about anything because they're going to feel misunderstood and all this other stuff, they could also end up with the mindset of, okay, this is fine, this is how things are supposed to go, and they may end up whoring themselves out as they get older and feeling like this is how I get love and attention and affection. So it's not good. A little interesting fact in my notes here, the 1966 German version of the Jerusalem Bible has the word arsenokoites translated as child molesters. So they didn't even translate it as, this big phrase for them that defile themselves with mankind. They flat out were just like, child molesters. They didn't even waste time. They just got right on it. They were just like, let's just be honest and call it how it is and move on and have a peppy day with cheese and crackers and bologna and funky feet, and yay. they just called it how they saw it and moved on. So I'm not really sure why we're having issues with it, why some people got it and some don't, but yeah, it's crazy. But that pretty much wraps this up, guys. That pretty much wraps this up. I thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. And that's pretty much it for this part 3. Let me go ahead and I guess do a little prayer here to wrap this up. Father, right now I thank you for this opportunity to be explaining these things to people. It's very important stuff. It's things that all Christians should know, regardless of sexual orientation. And Father, I thank all these people who, whether they can make it here or whether they're listening online, I know a lot of them will be listening online, and I thank you for just being able to take something like social media that can be just used in very bad ways, very wild ways, and use it in a way that's going to be pleasing to you, that's reaching out, using it to reach out to other people and give them your word. And I'm just thankful for everything, for all of your blessings, for all these opportunities and doors opening for me. I think you're awesome, and I'm just excited and happy and blessed to be doing things for an awesome God like you, Father. And in Jesus' mighty name I pray to you. Amen.